To the recording bit, which says avoid legal snags by telling everyone that they're being recorded, so you are aware that you're being recorded, so as to be no legal snags. What I was going to say, just to sort of kick off really, and just thanks to everyone, thanks to obviously Aaron, Rene, James, Johnson and Simon for agreeing to come on here, because as I say, we all have lives outside of all this IT stuff, and I know it's a bit of a sort of involves giving up a bit of time, but as I said, just recapping quickly, I've wrote a few articles about CBB and LTSB. I've had a few, not what I'd consider snarky comments from people on Twitter, but just kind of people say, oh, you're doing the wrong sort of thing. So I've thought, well, there's a few sort of issues that I keep getting asked by people out there, and they end up considering LTSB. So I just thought I'd briefly kind of sort of see if we can get people together. It's a shame no one from Microsoft actually ever agreed to do this, but they're a lot bigger company than the likes of Citrix and VMware, so it's often a bit difficult to get people to turn up. But I was just going to quickly just run through, if I can work out how to share my screen here, just to make sure that I'm not actually completely barting up the wrong tree, so hopefully you can see my screen. I'll just go to a slideshow that probably a few of you out there have sort of seen. Oops, I just need to swap that over. Just to make sure I'm kind of, for anybody who watches the recording of this, to give them a quick bit of sort of background, hope you don't mind. So we've got, those three classes of updates that you can get out there from Microsoft. We have feature upgrades, which I think are now called feature updates, which are essentially full versions of the operating system. We then have servicing updates now, which are what we've traditionally known as hot fixes and patches. And then we have definitions, which are things for like the malicious software removal tool, Windows Defender, things like that. And then you've got three kind of ways you can get these updates. You can go direct to Windows Update and get them all down from Windows Update. You can use Windows Update for Business, which is like a light version of WSUS with a bit of peering out there and things like that. And you can split them up into rings and whatnot. And then you've got your old WSUS or SCCM. But the specific bit we want to really talk about are the branches. So you've got Windows Insider, which is like the test branch where you get the flights of updates coming down ahead of schedule. So it's not like the technical previews. Then you've got Current Branch, which is obviously, you're on like the first release wave of that. Then you've got Current Branch for Business, which is like a secondary release wave, and then we've got the long-term servicing branch bit as well. So that's just the specific bit that we're talking about. The whole problem is, I don't think anybody out there is going to be adopting Current Branch. It comes down to a question between, do you go Current Branch for Business or do you go a long-term servicing branch? And that's essentially what I end up talking to people about a lot. And I always personally tend to say, you should try and adopt Current Branch for Business, but there are situations where you may want to go a long-term servicing branch. So this is where I think the interesting conversation's about, and I'm just going to sort of start with a bit of devil's advocate, throw it out there. I think the main issue that people have when they start talking about it is a trust thing. They're not entirely sure that they trust Microsoft not to screw anything up, and that's why people, even though Microsoft are encouraging them not to use long-term servicing branch, that they end up thinking about long-term servicing branch. I think for a lot of people it feels like not necessarily a safer option, but a more familiar option. It kind of fits into the way that they've done things in the past. So I'm just going to say, let's just have a bit of a debate about that point for starters, maybe, to just say, how would you go about addressing that with people who have this kind of fear and this mistrust of Microsoft when it comes down to doing updates?
Yeah, Simon here. First of all, I believe that something I hear a lot from our customers in Sweden is that they actually want to get out of how they used to do things. Like it's really hard on most organizations to have this 3 or 4 or 5 year life cycle, which always starts and ends with a huge project which they put a lot of money and time in, and you get a decent product out of it. So just to kick things off, where I hear my customers what they are saying, but again we come back to the trust issue, and I think that's something that basically comes down to laziness in many cases, like when things don't work out as they intend. Sorry for my baby daughter somewhere in the flats. She's crying quite loud at the moment. The trust issue comes down to laziness in many cases, as I see it. Yes, Microsoft usually breaks things. Sorry to say that, but the application flora we have today usually breaks at some point. And that's only an issue if you don't test updates and upgrades well enough, and if you don't have a rollback solution if something breaks.
Right.
So that's.
Yeah, but I can say that. I mean, I think the thing is as well, though, I know a lot of people have concern with, certainly to our talk to, and as I said, I'm not necessarily saying I'm a big fan. So I'm not necessarily saying, I don't think you should use the current branch of business model. I can see where the benefits are. I'm just saying, what people come back and turn around and say to me. The next thing is they say all of the testing and remediation that needs doing. There's quite a big resource undertaking to almost get all of that done, especially if you're in a traditional environment where you don't have your apps virtualized or anything like that, and it becomes a big burden. And then a lot of them are also kind of worried that they say, our support teams are going to be doing a lot more testing and remediation, and vendor engagement than they ever used to do. And again, is that something that how would you normally respond to that sort of fear, as it were, or that sort of concern?
Yeah, and that's I actually did a session for basically every single healthcare unit in Sweden like a year ago, and they brought that exact question to the surface. And the response to that is yes, that could prove difficult. Yes, you will probably need to put some additional effort down into that continuously testing of applications. But I also believe that will, in time, and I don't think it's that far away actually, it will be self-healing, because when more and more organizations migrate to Windows 10, you will have a lot more people putting pressure on software vendors to actually build applications and apps that support this kind of continuously evolving Windows. And I'm totally on point with that. You in the beginning will need to put some more time into testing and remediation and such, but I also believe that time usually gets invested in this 3, 4, 5 year period that we have until today. So instead of putting down thousands and thousands of hours into a huge migration project, you spread those hours out over time. And most of my customers would prefer that to having all those thousands of hours putting down in 1 year.
Right,
but it's a valid argument, of course, yes.
The other bit I was going to sort of throw in is that, kind of almost with the current branch and current branch for business model now, you have almost kind of like Microsoft, especially where it ties into SCCM, Microsoft have almost kind of mandated this kind of like a global patching model now. You have your first wave on current branch, they feed into all the sort of, basically they're doing a lot of the early testing on it, which then feeds back into Microsoft's patches over the period of that servicing window, and then you move most of your machines onto current branch for business. But a lot of people I speak to as well say they're a bit worried about in their existing patching model and kind of being expected to feed into this one that Microsoft have come up. Now, I can see from my perspective it would be great to have a global standard for that, but there's a lot of people out there who, for verticals for whatever reason, have their own ones. They have very specific maintenance windows and things like that. Do you think that's going to be a problem, or is it again something over time that people are just going to get used to and sort of, you'll pick it up and fit into it really?
I think it'll be a time thing. Personally, I think what we're seeing is we're going from what has been a very traditional model of updating for a very long time, and over time, like anything, we will adapt to it because you just have to, because we're going from the current model to it's all kind of cloud orientated, and with DevOps and everything, where they're doing releases every 2 weeks. And obviously at the moment, most IT departments are not anywhere near prepared for that or the testing involved. But I think over say a 5-year period, I think we will eventually get there. But obviously there's a huge learning curve for most people involved.
Yeah, there's also the feeling they might become, not DevOps really, but kind of like a test ops team really. You'd see support teams becoming more concerned with testing, which in any rapid release environment you have to be, don't you?
Well, exactly, yeah, and that's not the way as yourself, from your own projects and in education, I know for a fact that my project, which was in an education institution, they're not geared towards testing applications or anything like that on that kind of, it's a kind of a one big project thing, and then it kind of just, you maintain it from there on. So it's just, but they are also moving towards the cloud as well. So I think as we get more and more into cloud orientated deployments and that, I think, our philosophy will change, because we've been doing this way for the past, I don't know, 15 years or something. So it's a huge change. So
I think that's a lot of the problem as well, is that the people naturally generally have a fear of change, particularly where you're a support guy sat there and thinking, well, I've been doing it this way for so long, what am I actually going to do when this sort of thing comes along? So I think there is a bit of that, and I think to ourselves as kind of consultants, architects, whatever we are, there's often, you've got to almost try and sell that kind of brave new world towards them and say, this is the IT world is changing, as you say, and you're going to have to start doing things quite differently.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, but at the same time, I don't think it's an easy conversation to have with a lot of people who've been stuck doing something for a very long time, and we've all seen what can happen, and I don't think it's just the customers. We've seen the vendors as well. They're struggling with the release dates as well.
I was going to mention that. I did say.
Yeah, I know Res are really struggling to get out in front of the the current branch for business deadlines and stuff with their releases. So I think they're planning on 90 days after release, but I think that slipped on the last one, and I'm sure AppSense are pretty similar, and because, or even Citrix, Citrix have had issues with the VDA on current branch. So all the vendors are, it's the whole, I think, IT environment. It's not just the customers, it's everyone who has to kind of adapt to this method. And as I said, I think it will be I wouldn't say a rapid transition, but I think that there will be a bedding in period, and we're definitely in that now, I think.
Does that mean that we've all got to change our approach, though? Does it mean that essentially, I've spoken to some people who've deployed Windows 10, and because they've got all their apps virtualized just about, and they've got their user profiles virtualized, and their data is all saved off and managed in specific areas, it's much easier for them to adopt this model now. So does everybody out on the panel, as it were, think that app virtualization and user virtualization are key parts of the Windows 10 infrastructure?
I would, yes. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but definitely, yeah. I think it would make a huge difference if I've even noticed. I did a project. I'm doing a project at the moment, and I don't have Res, and it's a pain. I'm using group policy and scripts, and it's a pain. Also, I'm missing my user virtualization tools. So it's interesting to see from a different perspective, and how we used to have to do this, and it's like, we've moved on from this. I don't want to do it this way anymore.
Because Microsoft have also got things like UAV and Enterprise State Roam, and obviously AppV baked into the operating system now. So I think it's possibly their focus that it becomes a bit more, kind of like that, like almost just lift and shift your operating systems, more or less a commodity just sat there, yeah?
Yeah, and that's that's not a Windows or a current branch for business thing. That's something we need to adopt to anyways. The identity of the user is the most central thing we have. The devices, the OS is secondary more and more. So the virtualization of apps, of user profiles, whatever, is the natural step forward. But it will take some time, and I guess many organizations will realize when they've done that, when they have virtualized the apps, for example, they will realize that, now we can go for a Windows 10 current branch for business environment, but we can also run iOS devices, Android devices, more than one Windows device. So many other possibilities opens up if you embrace the modern way of working.
That's also
these tools are.
Sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say a lot of these tools are mid-tier and enterprise tools at the moment, right? So if I'm a small business, it's not likely that I've taken up something like UEV, or even something as simple as UEV because it's in the box, or AppV. So it's not, maybe if I'm a small business, I've got simpler set of applications, and maybe cross my fingers, I'm not going to run into some challenges like this. But by the same token, I'm not going to be virtualizing my apps. I'm probably not going to be virtualizing my user profiles and so on.
Yeah, right. Fair.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And I think we see many more solutions for that, because I work quite a lot with small and medium-sized businesses, and that's one of the most common questions I get. How can we run our apps, our profiles, the way the large enterprises does? And I think we are seeing more and more solutions to that, like with Citrix and Desktop and Zen App Essentials coming out. Sorry to curse, but a remote app actually did part of that.
Not especially. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I think that's definitely an area where I believe we will see more and more innovation moving forward, like bringing those enterprise-like features to small and medium-sized businesses.
Is that
so
somebody managing that at like a sort of a kind of Zen App Essentials sort of level, you're thinking, yeah?
Yeah. Or come
So
again.
it probably means a lot of these smaller businesses taking up managed services more than they used to, so that they can get somebody else, somebody like us, for example, to manage their environments more for them.
Yeah.
The other thing when I'm talking to companies about Windows 10, and which I don't think that platform that I don't think that they consider enough, is the actual universal app platform.
I was just going to mention that next.
How many of their applications can today, and remains to be seen in the future, how many of these their desktop applications or their Win32 apps can they replace with a universal application and or a web application? And then something like Zen App Essentials is, okay, those old Win32 apps, how many of those can we just push into a cloud service and just deliver remotely? So once we get to that point, then we remove the application compatibility challenges that we might have, or breaking dependencies and so on, and we're in a much better state. But I think for a lot of companies that is a future state. It's not really today.
Well, yeah, if you consider like financial institutions still have 16-bit and Zen App 5 farms still going with applications they can't get rid of and all that, I don't think we're quite at the stage where the legacy issue is still definitely there, especially in the customers I see anyway. Definitely, it's like, oh my god, what are you doing with that?
I think that's quite interesting that somebody's actually talked about modern apps in a positive way.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to curse them out, James, in fairness.
Because what we do see, and probably this is again all tied into the fear of change sort of thing, but we get a lot of, people have these Windows 7 estates, for instance, and they just think, resource-wise, we just want to get to Windows 10, and we want to get there and have it just like it was on Windows 7, and then we'll start thinking about, what we change going forward. So when you give them this new platform with all of these modern apps in, they also have a distressing tendency to reappear when you do a feature upgrade or a feature update. There's kind of they become a bit of an annoyance, and they kind of almost want to get them all out. And that's another of the reasons that I've seen people saying, let's go LTSB. But it's interesting that you would say, that maybe the modern apps are going to be the future side of things. Everything's going to run from there, and all those legacy desktop apps are going to go away. But that is, I've seen some Windows 10 deployments done specifically with LTSB just because they wanted that all of those modern apps removed from their image. And I know Microsoft said now if you remove them from the image and you do an upgrade, they're going to honour the fact that you've removed them. They haven't done that yet, but that'll be a good start, I think.
That's fixed in the creators update, so yeah.
Right, that's good, because that was really, really annoying when that happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, the modern apps are almost kind of like a symbol of Windows 10's kind of newness, and people have kind of knee-jerked a bit against them a bit, really. I mean, not necessarily for a lot of times. I mean, there are valid reasons. I mean, I know there's for instance, Skype for Business. Was it Skype? Skype has a desktop version and a modern app version. The user's getting confused. We've had users who've tried to use the mail app instead of Outlook because it just says email, and there's contact support, which they're forever clicking because they think it gets the IT team's attention. So there is a bit of work needed there. But I think that's more presentation than any underlying technology, but definitely they're quite a big, I wouldn't say a problem for people, but they just kind of have this inbuilt distrust of them, really, I think.
Yeah, and I know that Rene commented on that on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
Especially for VDI environments.
I think there's a big problem with this modern applications when it comes to roaming user profiles on non-persistent machines. So it's no problem today when you have your FAT clients, the common Office PC, one user, one device. That's no issue at all. But today we have a big issue in VDI, in non-persistent VDI, when you share your VDIs, when you share maybe also your physical machines. We have a student setup with about 2,500 students, 200 faculty members, and they share all their PCs and thin clients, and so this modern apps stuff is not yet solved, in my opinion, today.
So Microsoft doesn't want you to use VDI.
Yeah.
I think Windows 10 and modern applications, while I certainly think that they're a good solution for a good chunk of the user base, and it means no application deployment, no packaging, no patching, any of that kind of stuff.
So
the whole. Well, the platform is just Microsoft have not designed it for non-persistent. Yeah. It's all about a user gets a device and away they go.
So that was why I tweeted when it comes to VDI, my recommendation would be today, as of today, when you go with non-persistent VDI, where you have to roam your user profiles, go LTSB. You have no need for this universal apps, so it's not worth the time to get them out of your golden image. Take LTSB, and maybe in a year you will rebuild your golden image from scratch, and you can go with your next release of LTSB.
Does LTSB incur any sort of, because you've obviously you can't upgrade, can you? So when, say, I don't know, 3-4 years down the line, if you went LTSB, would you have to pay for a license again? I'm not very clear on that particular.
No, LTSB is a part of your SA agreement. So you need to run enterprise, and then you get upgrades as long as you have the agreement. Right. Basically.
So we have this educational agreement, and you can download whatever you want. Always the newest releases, and when I rebuild my golden image, I will start from scratch in maybe half a year or next year, or whenever the next release comes out, and I'm good to go.
So that's what we don't know, is when the next LTSB is going to be. We've had two. We've had an LTSB with the original release.
Yep.
We had one with the anniversary release.
Yep.
I don't believe we're going to see one with the creators update.
No, it said 2 years, the last thing I read, for the LTSB releases.
Yeah, because if they release them too quickly, they will probably be counterproductive towards what they are saying. Like if you get a new LTSB every single year, you're not that far behind if you go LTSB instead of CBB. So in that case, I definitely see Rene's point. So I bet that Microsoft will try to keep new releases of LTSB at least 2 years apart, just to bring a bit more. You should benefit from the new features in CBB and not be able to wait only a year, and you get basically all the new security features, mostly, I guess, in LTSB.
So with non-persistent desktops, why LTSB and not just remove universal apps and block them? If you're on CBB, Rene, you said there was a bit of effort to remove the apps, but it's just a PowerShell script, surely.
Yeah, of course.
And if you were to remove the apps, block universal applications, every time there's a new CBB released or a current branch released, there's invariably some sort of UI change in it. There are probably security and feature updates that you could take advantage of. Surely you could get, for non-persistent VDI, you can get a LTSB-like environment even on CBB.
I think it's a bit of a pain sometimes because you've got to redo the default user profile as well, though, haven't you? Once you've removed the apps, unless I've completely lost the plot in forgetting all about that. I can't remember. Probably Rene will know better than me. If you remove all the apps when you're doing the build, do you have to then remove the references to them from the default user profile? Do you have to do a custom default user profile to make sure it doesn't try and re-provision them? Or have I lost the plot there?
Problem is also, I think there's no official way to do this removal. For many modern apps, there's no problem, but when it comes to Edge, when it comes to the support app and all this stuff, you have to do
rename the
some
folders,
heavy tricks.
Yeah, those because obviously you don't get Edge with LTSB, but yeah, things like contact support and stuff like that. Obviously, you've got to. I mean, but as I said, there's a little bit of stuff with modern apps as well that's kind of like. Before you create custom start menus and create custom shortcuts and things like that. Modern apps are another of these bits of Windows 10 where it feels like a bit of that control's been sort of pulled away from you. It's I think it's more or less up to the developers how it deploys the shortcuts to the start menu and whatnot. It's very difficult to manage them in that traditional way. But again, maybe that's just something of the fear of change that people have got of that the sort of changes. But it's difficult to manage them in that sort of very similar sort of way that we had under Windows 7.
Yeah, and I think that's I've seen improvements on that point, and I still believe that we need more improvement on that. And I hope we will see that in the Enterprise edition of Windows, but we won't see it in the Pro edition. That's something Microsoft have said that they will. The Pro edition will be bring your own device so you shouldn't be able to do too much with it, and the Enterprise will be. Here you go, this is your work machine, do what you like, but we control some of it. But I believe we will see more of that. But again, Microsoft is pointing strongly on that the user should be able to do whatever they like. But in some cases, that's really something I work quite a lot with when we change OS for the end users, that we need to put like shortcuts and stuff on the start menu, but the user could, if they would and want, change it afterwards if they like. But I totally agree with you. I guess we will see more manageability on that side moving forward in the Enterprise Edition, but not in Pro.
Well, that will be good news because I say it is kind of. I mean, you talk about the sort of control there. Sometimes with Microsoft, it feels they're a bit like they're trying to do boiling a frog, as it were. That old analogy. If you do things slowly, you put a frog in a pan of water, you heat it up very quickly. Eventually, it'll boil to death. And I think there's certain parts of it where control is almost being ceded away in favour, bizarrely enough, of letting the user sort of pick their own bits. And I mean, shortcuts wise and things like that, I'm quite in favour of that. But things like setting a corporate homepage in Internet Explorer and things like that, they're kind of saying, oh well, the user should be able to pick that, and I'm thinking, really, is that going to fly that far? You should at least have some parts of it you can control by policy rather than allowing the users to customize it. I mean, it's we had an incident where we had a custom lock screen deployed, which was a bit of a hacky update, but it looked really nice and presentable in all the libraries and whatnot. And then one day we came in and it had all been replaced by a Tomb Raider sort of thing as well, which Microsoft said should not have specifically happened, but we weren't particularly amused by it. So it's little things like that, that if they're going to give us they don't have to give us absolute control of it. I understand why they don't want us hacking various bits of the operating system, but the look and feel, the kind of corporate branding, I think really should be put in there as an enterprise tool, and we should have full control over that.
Yeah, I agree. In enterprise, I absolutely agree, and like you said, I actually have heard Microsoft staff saying that you don't do this. Microsoft Windows is safe and secure and user-friendly without you applying any kind of policies, and I don't agree at all to that at the moment. But I see the point, and I think we could learn a lot from looking at the MDM policies to see where Microsoft is really putting down effort on what we are expected to manage in the future. So like Defender, WSUS, things that the user won't care about us managing. It will only benefit them. But I also see we are losing control of things. We still can set the start page in Edge and Internet Explorer, but we can't do that much else that we're used to with group policy.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, there's things also in there which is not really a servicing branches thing, but it's more like a Windows 10 thing.
Yeah.
Is where things like where OneDrive is so heavily integrated and tends to keep trying to come back. And if you're working with ShareFile or something like that, you don't want OneDrive announcing itself to the users. You don't want any potential for confusion. And that again is another area where I think some level of control to be able to say turn off the default AFSS. That would be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. The thing about servicing branches that get people saying is some people I work with have some really horrendous application vendors that they have to deal with, which we all do, obviously. But there was one particularly quite a large customer who were thinking very seriously about LTSB because they'd had some, I'm not going to name the company, but it took them the best part of 3 years to issue a fix for an application that was conflicting with some patch or part of the operating system. And they were very worried about Windows 10 from that perspective because it was a very important application. I know it's not something that's going to happen to everyone, and obviously vendors have got to get with the program and start saying, we're going to have to step up with Windows 10 if we want to put our stuff on it. But in those sorts of situations, would you recommend that they say, I mean, this was something like about 10% of their workforce used this particular app, and they were thinking, we're going to switch 10% of our machines to LTSB. Would you recommend that they use some sort of mitigation to get around that? Maybe, virtualizing the app off on an old Zen app farm or something like that? Would that be your advice to people like that rather than adopting LTSB?
Depends on the application, doesn't it? Just in case it had some dependencies on other applications that had to be local for some reason.
Right.
So yeah, you could be. I mean, it'd be a great way to go because you can just remove it from the desktop, and that's what we've been doing for quite a number of years, and make it easy. But it's obviously application dependent. I think with these third-party vendors and not getting on board or have that, as they have done in the past, is dragging their feet. I think Microsoft trying to force their hand is about creating much more stability in a Windows platform or trustworthiness. And because it's not just Microsoft, it's all the third-party vendors as well. So, as we were saying earlier, it's short-term pain for long-term gain, I guess, is what we'll get eventually. But I don't really know exactly what we do in the meantime.
Right, fair enough. The other thing I see is from Microsoft when they say, when they're deciding whether a machine should be LTSB or CBB, I think I saw something that said any machine with Microsoft Office should always be considered general purpose and should always run current branch for business. I know that wasn't a hard and fast rule, but do you think they're possibly being a bit sort of naive really there by assuming that anything with any Microsoft Office components should be general purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have several customers with environments that are quite harshly locked down, which is offline most of the time, but they still run Office. So I see their point, but I believe that we will have lots of machines running LTSB and Office, and lots, of course, in a relative perspective. But I don't see a connection between Office and CBB as such.
Fair enough. As I said, it is very difficult to generalise in that sort of area as to what is a general purpose. And what you've got to remember is as well, there's a lot of, when people say, when they say, they're for mission critical workloads like air traffic control or life support machines, and have you ever worked in the finance sector, for instance? I mean, everything is mission critical out there. Do you know what I mean? If you move a menu item, they want to know who did it and why it was done and, what their backup plan is or something like that. So it does, I don't think you can sell it to businesses by saying, giving them this, well, it's just for your mission critical workloads, because they'll say, well, that's all of them, isn't it? And that's basically the way they think about things. So I'm always trying to get across to people that, people say, you've asked the question, do you think you should use, I've never said really do we need to go LTSB right across the board. I think from my perspective, it's just the fact that if you take the difference between the RTM version of Windows 10 and the 1607 when the next LTSB iteration came along, there was already quite a marked difference in terms of not just features but how it looked between those two things. And so I've always been keen to get people on Current Branch for Business. The main problem I've had specifically myself is obviously just the whole sort of changes in control and the way the modern apps behave and things like that. So I've always thought CBB would be my first choice. The other thing I think is, though, it's kind of a bit confusing. Microsoft are encouraging people to use Current Branch as kind of a testing platform, and people almost think the machines that they're going to put on Current Branch, in this kind of the fast ring, as it were, within SCCM, they're more or less becoming test machines, not just for themselves but for everybody. And some people are a bit kind of, I don't know, they're a bit reluctant to almost feel like they're signing up for some sort of feedback sort of scheme. Do we try to push to people the idea that it's in their interests to be feeding back all this information from Microsoft, to make the sample set that Microsoft have got feeding back to them as big as possible about possible application issues?
I think that was almost the case before Upgrade Analytics. When Upgrade Analytics was released and you actually as a customer could benefit from telemetry and using CV and such in-house, so to say, and actually gain something from it, then I see that many of our customers actually consider both raising their telemetry level, send more data, and in return get more data for themselves, and also moving a bunch of computers. I usually recommend like 10% of our organization to run Current Branch, because that will give you a few months extra to test out. And if that benefits someone else, yeah, go ahead. But look at it from your own perspective first, that if you don't run Current Branch, you will actually lose a couple of months of testing. So that's how I look at it. But of course, Current Branch isn't for anyone. I usually pitch it like people that usually come to you and say, hey, why aren't we running this and this application? It's new and brand new, and I would love to have it. Give them Current Branch so they can be on the edge and get the latest updates straight away. And of course, some IT staff. The main thing I try to achieve with Current Branch is that you cover as close to 100% of the apps and applications in the organization with those 10% of the machines.
Right, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's because you've got Windows Insider as well, which your absolute sort of bleeding edge test use. That is very handy actually, Windows Insider, I think, because if you remember before, we used to get the technical preview 3 months before release, and you had to do all of the testing inside of that window. Whereas now you get these flights, which allow you to get a lot closer to the sort of bleeding edge and find out what's potentially coming down the pipeline later on, which I do think is a great idea. So don't let anybody say that I always give Microsoft a bad press, but one question I always get asked by people when they're weighing up servicing branches, one I never really find a straight answer to, and we probably won't find straight answers, how long actually is a servicing window? Because there's so many different things you can put in there. Even now there's GPOs that allow you to do an extra little bit of deferral as a pause upgrade one. So does anybody have any idea as to how long it actually is, really?
It's 2 CBBs.
But
that's supportability. So two CBBs before you'll no longer receive updates. If you're on Enterprise Edition, pretty sure that you can avoid that. You could deploy a Current Branch and just leave it there indefinitely and never upgrade it. So yeah, by the time that CBB, I think it's not quite that. When does 1501 go out of? It's in like next month, I think 1501 goes out of support.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a few months after the second CBB that the third one back.
Yeah,
if I'm counting correctly.
You stated that somewhere in your blog post I commented on. Like you have a few months and then
There's a
short
60-day
period of
grace
time.
period, isn't there?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
there's
Yeah.
something called pause upgrades GPO, which allows you to pause it for,
Yep.
for 5 weeks, because for some reason Microsoft have decided that each month has 5 weeks in it, which I'm quite understand. But I mean, it's when you try and give a straight answer to people. So I've kind of like just ballpark figured, said it's going to be anywhere between about 8 and kind of 12 to 14 months. Is that a
Yep.
fair representation of how long you've got to get from one current branch for business release to the next?
Yeah, I would say so, and I think that's one of the biggest issues that Microsoft have had to work with. They have changed how they released Windows over the 2 years they have released it. So from the beginning they said somewhere between 2 and 3 per year. They said 2 per year and such, and I believe that with the Creators Update will be coming into like the normal pace of it. So I guess 1 in the spring, 1 in the fall, and that's about it. And then your 8 to 14 months will make sense. And again, Microsoft won't release a Windows version that they don't believe in. That's so. Like probably they could move it forward 1 month, move it backward 1 month, if they see that will improve the quality of it.
If you
I
get
think this was the last patch day, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if they take it up towards, maybe it might be looking about 18 months between upgrade things. We're not really that much far off, because before it was maybe like sort of 2 to 3 years between major upgrades. So
Yep.
if they could get it down to about every 18 months or so, I'd feel a lot happier, Bunny, because as you said at the start, we were talking like 3 CB releases in a year, and it was like there's going to be a full OS upgrade every year. So that was the worry for a lot of people. So I think if they can drive it around that way, then, and I mean, do you think they'll ever reach a stage where they think, we've just about finished with the Windows 10's development and, it's perfect, or will it always continue evolving? Is that the thing?
But software never stays still, does it?
Well,
Yeah.
there's that, yeah. It's interesting. Sorry.
But I think they will. I think we need to look at the entire like Windows stack moving forward. So Windows Mobile, Windows on ARM, Windows Holographic. It's possible that we won't see the same pace in innovation in the, sorry to say, but standard Windows. But we could probably see a higher pace in innovation looking at the entire flora of Windows releases they actually have out at the moment. So I think they will work very hard on bringing new stuff out, but not necessarily primarily to desktops and laptops. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. As I said, that whole thing will change around. It's just that, sometimes people get the feeling that, sometimes people just put new things in for the sake of changing something, for keeping that sort of whole model moving along. I mean, certainly every time I look at my Android phone, something's changed on it, and occasionally I think, was it not like that before? And then it changed back, and it just seems to be rolling forwards just for the sake of having something to change. It's actually the Server 2016's LTSB only as well, though, isn't it, on the desktop edition? Is that just because server end workloads, not specifically taught on RDSH or XenApp or anything like that, server end workloads don't generally need all of those features putting in as aggressively as the client and desktop, do you think?
Well, this is where you're going to see, well, actually, if you have a look at Windows Server 2016, as you've said, I guess the full release is an LTSB. Nano Server is current branch for business, which is a strange one. But I guess the target for Nano Server is sort of DevOps type environments. But with Windows Server 2016, because it's LTSB, you're going to see differences in features and user interface between what you see in a full desktop delivered via XenApp, for example, and what the user sees on their physical Windows 10 device. So that's going to be something to handle for their users. What sort of training or user What are you going to have to tell the user to say, okay, your Windows 10 desktop does this, but I'm sorry, your XenApp desktop doesn't?
Cool.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
Mm.
And that's going to change. It's going to continue. You know, there's LTS Windows Server released last year. We got the Creators Update coming. We'll probably have another update by the end of the year. Meanwhile, Windows Server 2016 is staying still until whenever that next release is going to be. Who knows when that is?
Excellent. I think I've just about exhausted all the questions that I got emailed, apart from that really sort of cynical one that said, will LTSB always be around, or is it just a halfway house to get everyone in and then it will be retired? Does anybody think Microsoft might do that? You know, that's actually another interesting question because, is there a Windows embedded version of Windows 10, or is it all just kind of like we've got the IoT version, haven't we? So is LTSB meant to be used on things that Windows embedded was previously used for? I'm sorry, I can't remember whether Windows embedded had a Windows 10 sort of as a version. So all people were saying is, do they think Microsoft would ever take LTSB away? Do you think that? And also, is LTSB meant to be used for those, sort of point-of-salesy sort of machines and things like that?
Yeah, well, wasn't that one of the things they said? LTSB was like, as you said, air traffic control, ATM machines, stuff like that,
Yeah,
Because I remember when we were first talking about this, you were mentioning LTSB, and I was like, let's see, and the whole current branch for business, etc., etc. And since then, I've had people who think that LTSB is the way to go for enterprise deployments of Windows 10, and that you'd be mad to go with current branch for business. But I suppose there's all these factors you have to weigh up. And as Aaron was saying, like, the discrepancies between, what you're going to be getting if you're running LTSB, possibly an operating system that's 2 years behind what the current one is, and then is that going to cause user confusion, which is, going to make things even worse. So there's a lot of factors to be weighed up in all of this.
Yeah, and talking about embedded, you can actually. It's not an embedded release as such, but you can take any Windows Enterprise release, CBB or LTSB, and configure it in a embedded-like mode. But I see the point in that, and that's one of the use cases I've seen for LTSB, like industry computers and such, where I actually have one customer that are running CBB on their entire production line. They are making agricultural machines, and they use CBB for every single computer in their manufacturing line. And it's working for them, but I have several customers like paper industry and such, where that won't be possible, and they will probably go for LTSB, and that's a valid use case in my opinion, because that's applications that are really, really hard to change. You have extremely long life cycles on those kind of use cases. So that's a more than valid argument for LTSB and a more than valid use case. But going back to this, everything that runs Office should be CBB. It's not true in you absolutely will have computers running Office on LTSB, but I believe that gives you a pointer on how few devices that should run LTSB if you look at how few devices you normally have that lacks Office.
Right.
So there's two versions of Office, right? There's almost an LTSB version of Office, which is the MSI installer, and then there's the I guess what you could call the current branch and CBB version of Office, which is the click to run. So if you're going to do LTSB, you're probably likely to be putting the MSI version of Office 2016 on that.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yes, that's a very good point. Yeah. Cool. The only other question I had left was somebody just sent me a thing that just said Azure with a question mark. Obviously intimating that the Windows 10 current branch is intended to make you Azure migration, which was obviously another of the things that I stuck in my presentation. Do you think that Azure is a big factor in current branch for business, or is it just a case of the industry catching up with the likes of Google and Firefox and Apple, who've admittedly had a kind of service in branch-based delivery mechanism for quite a while now?
don't know, Azure's current branch, really, isn't it? You don't even get current branch for business in Azure.
Yeah, that's it. What I was saying is
in-
they're kind of trying to make people, used to this to the extent where they think,
Yeah.
well, Windows 10 on Azure is a lot more palatable to me now that I've adopted this. Really, that's the.
Well, I mean, Azure is almost your current branch for your data center.
Yeah.
As in your whole data center is now on current branch. We're not just talking about a desktop operating systems here. We're talking about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. If you're going to be running Windows 10 VDI in Azure, then I haven't actually seen the details yet. But do you get a choice between current branch and current branch for business, or you just get current branch for business?
I think I heard current
You get
branch of
LTSB?
business mentioned when I saw something from Citrix not so long ago, but don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure,
Yeah,
but it's
well,
definitely one of the two.
Yeah, that'd be the thing. I suppose Citrix with Citrix Cloud are able to, do release updates every two weeks now. So I suppose that it could run current branch, but just going on how previously we've had problems with current branch for business and with VDAs and stuff, but I suppose they're just adapting, and they do have it all on the clouds, their own cloud environment.
That would actually be something good that they could share afterwards, like how what's the name of it? How Microsoft does IT. How do they and Citrix manage their offerings if they run CBB? That would be really interesting. But I would be really surprised if the Citrix offering run anything else than CBB. I think that would be counterproductive for Microsoft. Like, look at them; they won't, they don't dare to run CBB in their offering. So I bet they will run CBB.
Yeah, I would guess they do.
Cool. Right. Unless anybody else has got anything else to shout out, guys, that's been very helpful. Although now I'm going to have to go and write another article about servicing patches. But hopefully I can sort of post a recording along with it and save myself a problem. But yes, right. Thanks very much, guys. That is excellent. As I say, I've been wanting to get one of these done for a while with anybody who's willing to sort of take the plunge. But it's just a shame I couldn't get someone from Microsoft to give us a more official line. But anyway, hopefully this might be of use to some of the people out there. So thank you very much for giving me some of your time. I'm aware that got people from all across the world, so I've not going to necessarily say your evenings, but there you go. But yes, thank you very much, guys. If anybody has anything else to add, or is that just about we done?
At risk of going off on another tangent, the thing we didn't mention was the changes to Windows 7 patch updates.
Ah, yes.
So now you get update roll-ups. So Microsoft through Windows 7 and the changes to the way that they do approach patches for Windows 7, I think are trying to prepare customers for Windows 10.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree with that. Either they're trying to prepare them with the Windows 10 model, or they're just trying to annoy them off the Windows 7 model, which I think there's only a service pack 1 for Windows 7. It's something like 180 patches now you've got to put onto a Windows 7 instance if you want to go from build to fully patched. So yeah, it is very much down that line. Now, I think it's quite interesting point to make as well. If I remember when we went from Windows 8 to 8.1, and it was the first time we'd ever seen a kind of almost like an expiry date put on what was essentially almost an operating system upgrade, and it was quite noticeable that the time frame that we had there almost seemed to be the one that they fed into the Windows 10 maintenance window model. So I'm just wondering whether that 8.0 to 8.1 was a bit of a test to see what sort of a servicing window they could not get away with really, but one that people would be accepting of. So I don't know whether that's just my tinfoil hat brigade coming out or not, but that's definitely the impression that I got. But yes, excellent.
Yeah. And my view on that is the new servicing of Windows 7 and 8 is actually causing more issues than Windows as a service on Windows 10 for many of my customers, because they aren't ready for that kind of servicing. They don't know how to manage the updates. They don't know what they are going to do if something breaks. So that's actually causing more headache for many customers. So in a way, it kind of drives them to Windows 10. But I don't think that's not the point. I just see it like they are trying to raise the security on Windows 7, which they need to do.
Yeah, it's ironic that Windows 10 is actually talked about now. People are saying, "Oh, well, we're looking at the security features," and it just never ceases to amaze me when they say we're looking at a new version of Windows from a security perspective. I'm like, wow, look what we've come to. I remember the days of Blaster and Sasa when I was literally just chasing my tail for days trying to kill viruses within data sets. But excellent, right? I can hear my kids running about, so I'm going to go and taser them into bed in a second. But thanks very much, guys. That's been excellent, and hopefully I should post an article out with the recording attached, assuming it's worked, and hopefully all of you have very good points in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye.